Hello everyone and welcome to the first album review of 2022, and that's for Dawn FM by The Weeknd. So The Weeknd is back with a brand new album, going once again into the synth pop and disco directions that we saw with his previous album, After Hours, which was by far his most successful direction with his sound, so it's only natural for this new album to be the same in style. And even for me, After Hours is possibly my favorite The Weeknd work, at least out of everything I've heard from him, because I haven't really been that much into The Weeknd's music. When it comes to some of the albums that I've heard of him, I'm not really that much of a fan. I think that he went into some quite intriguing directions with some of the very first material. However, After Hours ended up being a pretty decent album for me. I never really returned that much to it, and I think that it's a pretty inconsistent album with lots of tracks that I don't really care for. But when it comes to the singles, After Hours actually contains some of the most intriguing hit songs I've heard in recent memory. This type of sounded production from tracks like Save Your Tears and Blinding Lights is something that you don't really find in the majority of radio hit songs, so for me those two tracks in particular are two of the greatest moments to hit the mainstream in recent years. Getting into Dawn FM feels quite familiar, and I think that it manages to push even further into this direction of this like 80s synthpop sound, which when it comes to the sounds and the aesthetics, there are some really fascinating works over here, and the production for the most part is really solid. I really ended up liking many of the beats, many of the vocal deliveries. This album sounds really cool. One thing that in my opinion helps once again with this album is the contribution of One Tricks Point Never in the production in the majority of the tracks, which in this album in particular I feel that we get even more of the signature One Tricks Point Never sound, especially when it comes towards some of the interludes with radio transmissions, which seems to be a major concept and theme on this album, but it also ended up giving me the vibe that this is something that I could possibly hear into some of the new material out of One Tricks Point Never, which in my opinion it's not necessarily making for my best direction out of his sound. However, I do see the appeal, and I find it kinda intriguing having moments like this, especially being so well crafted and produced, being put in an album of an artist that is so mainstream. Dawn FM as an intro makes a quite nice work to put you in the mood. When it comes to the other two main interludes though, with the tracks Every Angel is Terrifying and Phantom Regret by Jim, these two tracks end up feeling way too long for interludes. They're just a bunch of random different sounds with a few spoken word parts, and apart from their appeal, they ended up feeling really forgettable and longer than needed in my opinion. So, what we end up having with the rest of the tracks out of this album is basically just a pretty decent album and nothing more apart from that. It's an okay album, but I wouldn't consider it an improvement from After Hours. I didn't even really find tracks over here, unlike the previous album, that I would say that I enjoy a lot. And when it comes to the hit song out of this album, Take My Breath, in my opinion it's inferior compared to tracks like Save Your Tears or Blinding Lights. However, I think that what's interesting with this particular version of Take My Breath is that in the album they ended up creating an extended version that goes for 5 minutes, and in my opinion it actually works kinda better, because you have the introduction and the outro portion of the songs where it's mostly like the beats and the bass synth, but it actually creates a much better aesthetic that is quite more fitting with the rest of the directions of the album. The more monotone approaches and instrumentations in this occasion makes it work somewhat better in my opinion, so it ends up feeling like a bit of a disconnect when the main track comes with the vocals and the additional elements, but even with that being said, this track ends up being one of the catchiest and most memorable moments out of the entire project. It is a quite decent song, I can't deny it, and I think that the extended version makes it sound a bit better. Now another moment that I ended up enjoying out of this album is the track Gasoline, which actually contains some quite weird vocal effects, which I was kinda skeptical at first. I didn't really know how to feel about them, but I ended up liking the more refreshing approach on this particular track. It feels a bit more unique and different compared to pretty much anything else out of the album, and I like some of the risks that it took, and the instrumental is also kinda decent. How Do I Make You Love Me is a pretty decent continuation of what Gasoline started, and it also had a pretty nice transition on the track Take My Breath. After this point we get some pretty okay moments with tracks like Sacrifice and Out of Time. The track with Tyler the Creator, Here We Go Again, was actually one of the moments I was the most excited to hear, but I ended up not liking this track. Yeah, this wasn't really for me. I mean, I kinda get the different set of mood, but I think that I would personally prefer it if it had beats attached to it. It feels kinda empty and lackluster, and yeah, for me it ends up being a bit of a lost potential. The next track though, Best Friends, I think that the biggest issue with this track is how short it is, because this is definitely one of the greatest moments in the album. I ended up really liking the beat and the slightly more aggressive bass synths. It is a really cool and catchy song, and definitely one of the most dynamic moments in the album that also catches nicely the whole aesthetic and with a bit of a more dark mood to it. The album though keeps after this point with not some of its best moments, with tracks like Is There Someone Else, or with a much weaker sort of continuation with the next track, Starry Eyes, which also feels like a pretty lackluster song that could have been done in a different way, and in my opinion would possibly benefit from it if it had a bit attached to it. Another moment that felt pretty weak for me was the track I Heard You're Married. The chorus was weak, also the lyrics felt a bit weird in this particular one, and also Lil Wayne as a feature was not good at all. I never really liked Lil Wayne's vocals or his delivery, but there's like a huge disconnect with this track in particular. It doesn't sound fitting. But finally we have the track Less Than Zero, which I would consider it to be the best moment out of the album. It is a really beautiful track, the most dynamic moment in this album. The chorus is really catchy, epic and vibrant, and for me it's the catchiest moment out of the album, and actually the one track that goes the closest to some of the really appealing stuff out of After Hours. So yeah, for me it really works for The Weeknd to go into this direction once again with this brand new album. At the end of the day I feel that this is just a pretty decent album with some okay tracks, but not necessarily something that I would say was really memorable. I don't really see myself returning to this. I had fun with it, but yeah, there's not like really more to it than just that. I'm gonna give Dawn FM a 6 out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.